planting July, setting fire to the sky. Here comes this rising tide. So well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Wasatch Report. I'm your host, Suzanne Sherman, coming at you live on Monday, the 23rd of October, year of our Lord 2017. You've tuned into the Renegade Ramblers Radio Network. The number here, we are live. You can call in 717-467-1736. I want to thank Jeff Johnson for showing up and staying late for my show, producing me today. He got up. He's got a really bad sinus head cold going on, and he came through and did it. I can't think clearly. Jeff, kudos to you for coming through. I know I'm toast when I've got one of these things going on. I want to encourage you to download our app. It's free, and we have it available for the Android platform. You can go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Renegade Ramblers Radio Network, and there's a link on there. You can click and listen live online. Here we say we are the network of 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers. I'm going to explain over and over again how that line works for us and how we do things here and how we apply those thoughts to modern day issues, because the solutions lie in looking backwards. Ignore the Communist Manifesto, Marxist propaganda, forward rhetoric. The answers don't lie in that area. We need to look at our founding principles, because there are the answers where we look to personal responsibility, self-reliance. That is how we're going to get forward, get ahead, and survive what I think are troubling times ahead of us. I want to reiterate why I'm talking about the things I do. There are so many prepper sites, survival sites out there. I sometimes tend to shy away from talking about that on my show, but that is really what my focus has been. And this week we had deer season. It is deer season here, general buck deer in Utah. So I ended up filling my tag on opening day. But one of the comments I had received from a listener was that her husband was very impressed with the deer, but also she's trying to get him on board with becoming prepared, and how much she appreciates the advice I'd been sharing on my show with regards to preparedness. And what I think I like to focus on is what our good friend Rick Barrett also said, is we take preparedness and normalize it. A lot of people first heard about this preparedness lifestyle by television shows such as Doomsday Preppers, which really is about sensationalizing a topic and getting ratings, but really didn't have much useful advice. So what I really focus on is tying together what the proper role of government is, what our founding principles were, meaning do we have a government that is operating by our consent, or have they taken over and are we merely chattel and taxpayers to fund this government? When we realize that we have gone off the rails, we have abandoned our founding principles, meaning being ruled by those to which we have consented, it makes us realize that we do need to be prepared. And I kind of share my personal story is growing up in California. I grew up fearing earthquakes as a child. I overheard stories about how California is going to end up in the ocean one day, and that kept me very frightened. As I grew up, and once you become a mother, particularly I feel should lose that right to wring your hands and be afraid. You need to come up with some solutions. You owe it to your family to be able to handle these situations. So I started by preparing for earthquakes. And this is the information I would share to somebody, for instance, that has a partner, family member, spouse that is not quite on board with you, because we really care. Their opinions matter. We live with them. We live under the same roof, and this can be a hobby. It can be a lifestyle. Going back to Doomsday Preppers, the opinion that they seem to cause by a lot of members of society is that we're a fringe group of tinfoil hat lunatics that have their kids running around with AR-15s and pointing handguns in people's faces during these silly drills. But the reality of it is, this is something that normal people do. This is something that was a way of life in the Depression era. These are skills that people should still have for today. So I would tell people to normalize prepping, and tying into the hunting topic, I would say to appeal to somebody that you are living with who might not be on board. Find something that's near and dear to them. So in the instance of a hunter, this is somebody that spends time out in the wilderness, and they have to be prepared when they're pursuing this passion. If they're not, then they're downright foolish. Jeff and I discussed this a week or two ago about having IFAKs, an individual first aid kit, with you at all times, and you have to tailor that to the specific need of when you're out. John Robert of Survival Medical, we talked about the various options for medical kits as well that you can take with you, that you can have in the home, and then for different activities. So find something that will encourage somebody to expound upon what they're already doing. Well, if you're prepared when you're going out hunting, wouldn't it also make sense to maybe have a kit in the vehicle? If you know somebody that travels a lot, wouldn't it just make sense to have this in the vehicle? People that live in California, earthquakes are a real danger. And yes, you might have a lot of faith that the infrastructure will provide you with what you need, but there might be some time that there is a delay. Your water main might be broken. You might lose your gas main. What are you going to do until the situation returns to normal? Because there is a period in time where you have an incident and then you have a return to normalcy. So you might think that's going to be a couple hours, or you can prepare for something that's a few days, or you can go long term and prepare for the end of the world scenario, the poop hit the fan scenario. But start small and make it common sense. Encourage people to join in a manner which makes sense to them. So again, think about having preparedness. If you know somebody that has small children, if you have small children in your family, this was a question that was presented on one of the survival forums that I'm on. Is I have a 5-month-old, and it makes preparedness seem very impractical. How do you prepare for a 5-month-old? Well, when I talk about preparing for the family, I've had Arthur T. Bradley, PhD. He is the author of the national bestseller, The Family Preparedness, the Disaster Plan for Family Preparedness. You take into account the members of your family. You have a go bucket. We've talked about that. Have a go bucket, 5-gallon bucket with a lid on it, that has supplies that are suited to each member of the family. If you have to evacuate. Last week I was in California. What's going on in California right now? We have these wildfires. Them from the airplane. I've never seen anything like that. It looked like an apocalyptic scene. Just one great fire after another, taking the whole view from this airplane. So we have all these situations that are currently underway. We had the hurricanes in Houston, in Florida. Puerto Rico's been devastated. There's no reason anybody can come up with to say, we really don't need to be prepared. I've said this before. We live on the most dangerous landmass. This continent that our union occupies is the most dangerous landmass weather-wise on the entire planet. So it would behoove everybody. I think over 60 million people have been under hurricane warnings at one time or another when we have hurricane season. So preparedness should be something that is normal to you. And again, what we have to do is look at how the government has failed people when they rely on government. I tell them all the time, the more you rely on the government to save you from a disaster, the worse the disaster is, the greater your disappointment's going to be. So how hard is it to convince a significant other, get them to watch the news, have water on hand? We've all lost water and power at certain times. And have these things handy and bring them on board slowly, and make a hobby of this. Something that's fun to do also And this ties in homesteading. This also ties in nutrition and good health. I say all the time that good health is money in your preparedness bank. Grow your own food. Tomatoes, easy to do. Think about where you're living and what you can grow. That was how I started in California also. I had these prolific crops because the weather was just so great for growing food out there. So I learned then, well, what do you do when you have these bumper crops? You start storing them. So learn food preservation as well, how to make meals and however you want to dehydrate them, freeze dry them, or can them. So I've been doing a lot of that myself, and I've learned all of this. And the thing is, you don't have to be preparing for the end of the world situation. You can have, again, just a power outage. People get sick. People lose their jobs. There are so many reasons to do this. So I'm going to be incorporating more of these ideas into the show. I'm very encouraged by the messages that I had been receiving from people. So just wanted to start the show off on a note, just reintroducing my motivation for doing this and why I want to encourage people to think like this. Again, 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers. Look at the homes of our founding generation. These people grew their own food. They had this, they were self-sufficient. And this is something that we need to think about and grow. And I also consider, when you think about tyranny, it exists at levels not just from the general government we have, and this also ties into growing your own food. We have these zoning laws. I'll be talking about these that prohibit people from growing food, say, in their front yards. So that was something that just made me digress for just a moment, because I want to talk about a local issue here in Utah. Here I am. And Jeff is doing this as well. He's employed outside the home, but we've got this little network set up, and we're people that are working outside of our homes. Are we making money at this? No, not right now, but there's a possibility to. So it brings up an issue, and this is something that's being discussed out here in Utah. The Libertas Institute is my friend Connor Boyack. He was on my show on the Suzanne option on the Crusade channel, and I'm going to have him on this one as well. He is also the author of a series of books called The Tuttle Twins, and it's kind of a precursor to the Ron Paul school homeschooling curriculum. But anyway, there's an article that came out in the Libertas Institute a few weeks ago. And this is an example of why we need to be independent. And these are laws that I would ignore. I try to flout these laws whenever I can. But the article is called Utah Cities Flout State Law to Collect Money from Home-Based Business Owners. And I'm bringing this up because, again, having your own business is a way of being self-reliant. But once again, we bump into the government whenever we try to succeed or do something on our own. Here we go. The Libertas Institute has been working with Senator Ondereg on legislation that would exempt home-based business owners from having to pay money to their city or county for legal permission to work in their own home. Earlier this year, the legislator agreed to compromise language that achieved the goal. And the language says that if the impact of your home-based business does not materially exceed the impact of the residential use of your home, the city must exempt you from having to pay the money. Now, when I lived in California, there was a gal operating a daycare center in our neighborhood, and it significantly impacted the community. There was traffic coming in and out, and we lived in a very small agricultural neighborhood. And it created some issues. And she was unlicensed, but I'm not going to get into that, whether or not she would have been licensed. Regardless, I can understand why they might have a concern or an interest if the business significantly interferes with or impacts the rest of the community. But here we're talking about home-based businesses that do not materially exceed, as I mentioned before, the impact. So we're not talking about affecting traffic, about having large crowds of people coming to and from your home. We're talking about people like me, people that want to sell items from their home. So if you're working on a computer or selling, as they say in this article, essential oils, sewing, or designing clothes, having zero impact on your neighbors, that this law would apply to them. You know, this is the community, the business that I'm thinking of for this would be our good friend from Tail Gunner Apparel. This is a gal, Robin, who just makes these clothing items and household items out of her home and impacts the neighborhood not at all. So that's kind of what we're thinking about here. Going back to the article, some cities are continuing this fight they've been waging for years. And I'm sure you can imagine what's motivating them challenging this, and that is going to be the almighty dollar. As the article continues, it all comes down to the money. Throughout Utah, cities have been taking over $1 million from home-based businesses for these unnecessary fees. The city of Centerfield Council met last week to discuss how their city was going to circumvent this law by doing what? By simply changing the name. They're calling it now an administrative fee instead of a license fee, thereby enabling them, and this is a quote, to keep their revenue up. And that's what this is about, keeping the revenue up. Jeff's going to play a clip for us in just a moment. The staff and council members here, there's a recording of them chuckling amongst themselves, and a resident chimes in sarcastically asking if they're going to make this fee a mandatory donation, and the city officials respond affirmatively. Jeff, do you have that ready to queue up and play?
All set to go.
Let's play that.
Like that. So we have been charging a business license, and now we find out that is not legal.
Well, they just changed it.
They changed it this year, so we have to change this.
So now
Business licenses, so we keep our revenue up. We're not charging a license anymore. We're just feeding them. Right?
Technicalities.
So yeah.
In other words, you're asking for a mandatory donation.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Called an administration fee.
Voluntary.
It costs us $50 just to keep track of all these people that are doing business.
Not paying.
Yeah.
So,
Comments?
is there any comments or any questions that you all have?
Good, bad, or ugly?
Okay.
That's pretty easy for me.
Okay.
Once upon a time, we went over war because of crap like this. The arrogance is just dripping from their voices. The fact that they are circumventing this law because they believe our money belongs to them. They are entitled to this. Notwithstanding any laws, they're going to go around it. They're going to change a name. Damn, be the residents. Forget the laws. We're just going to call it an administrative fee. So they're not only resisting this change and fighting to keep this revenue, several cities are interpreting this law, and I'm now going back to the article, so as to allow them to require a fee if a home-based business receives customers. So if one person a day comes to your home for business purposes, the city wants your money. A rational reading, but we're not talking about rational people here, of this state law would demonstrate how incorrect their premise and their position is. One person a day does not impact neighbors. It does not materially exceed residential use, as it's quite common for friends, neighbors, church members, or other people to come and visit a home. So cities using this argument are in violation of both the letter and the spirit of the state law. But there are more to these arguments. Some cities are arguing that deliveries to the home disqualify a home-based business owner from receiving this exemption. One such city is the city of Syracuse. That's Syracuse, Utah, probably channeling the name, their inner New York Syracuse, indicated that they were taking direction from we have this government agency, because government, Utah Business License Association. The licensing official in Syracuse explained to the Libertas office that the city's argument could be that the impact has to be measured, this is Orwellian here, not against an individual resident, but the neighborhood. Once again, you see these statists going away from the individual and always going towards the collective, because it's the only way they can justify their policies. So if you get deliveries twice a day from Amazon, or delivery once in a while, it does not materially exceed what would normally be in the community. But this city employee suggests that the argument would only work if it could be proven that, say, heavy deliveries were a standard for the whole neighborhood. The exemption would only apply if everybody gets packages as well. So what that means is my wallet and my liability to the local community, city officials, depends on whether or not my neighbors are getting deliveries as well. And those deliveries may or may not be related to any kind of business. So once again, this is the disregard for the individual, bringing them in, rounding them up in the collective, just like cattle, to determine what their financial obligations are going to be to fund this city and keep their revenue flowing. Once again, according to the Libertas Institute, this clearly violates the letter and the spirit of this law. It's a transparent, desperate attempt to continue to extract money from residents, and this is an especially problematic solution given there are no services provided by the city in exchange for this fee. And again, this doesn't cost the city anything. So why would the city be interested in collecting these fees? I mentioned Orwellian earlier, and here's another example of what would be Orwellian in this policy. No services are provided, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't put any expenditures into this, because in the Centerfield City Council audio, officials said that the $50 fee they were imposing was to keep track of all these people that are doing business. Why does the city need to keep track of somebody, what they refer to here as a mommy blogger or a piano teacher? And the simple answer, the obvious answer, is they don't. As evidence of that, he shows two examples, two cities we have here in Utah, Farmington and South Ogden. Unlike other cities that have been wiggling around this state law to keep the money from coming in, these cities completely repealed their home-based business licenses. Farmington's website now says you do not need a license from Farmington City to operate a business out of your home. South Ogden sent a letter to home-based business license holders, and which read in part, "This letter is notice to you that the city license application will now be closed. Good luck with your future success." How ironic is it that success can be achieved once the government gets out of our way? And that really is the key to this. Once the government gets out of our way, we can succeed. I was perusing around the Summit County website, and I was very disillusioned to when I realized how progressive this place has actually become. I knew it was because, you know, we have Park City here, but I didn't realize how much of a problem this was. Their Summit County, Utah page is absolutely full of climate change solutions, propping up solar solutions. This wasn't an issue when I moved here. I was asking some people about solar, and they said, you know, solar is really not popular in Utah because energy is not very expensive there. It's not needed. Since I have moved here, they are ramming these solar panel programs down your throat. At all times, you're seeing offers in your news feed, and I'm getting telephone calls, solicitations to put solar panels on my roof, government sanctioned, government sponsored. I left California to get away from these Solyndra type policies. And I asked these people on their website, if this is such a good idea, why does the government need to be involved? And it's just, the answer is, well, we want cleaner air, water, less toxins. And their premise is that this can only happen if the government gets involved. Here's a quote from a debate I was having with somebody, and he said that this needs to happen only because we humans are too stupid to not soil our own nests. Well, response to this was, well, then clearly government is the solution. But here's the problem. Is the government not composed or comprised of human beings? So I guess his point is that only members of government are smart enough to not soil in their own nests, and the rest of us are just pigs who have to be herded and tended by our overlords. This arrogant premise that government is the solution to all of their feel-good green energy policies. And the more I see this, the more I come across, it comes back to why I want to disassociate myself from them as much as I can. This brings us full circle to why we prepare, why we want to be self-reliant. They want to control us. I don't want to be controlled at all. Jeff, I'm going to have you take us into a break, and we're going to continue after on this subject and a little bit more of the local angle on the Wasatch Report here on the Renegade Rambler Radio Network, 18th Century Ideas for 21st Century Thinkers.
You won't disappear when you wear Tail Gunner Apparel custom camo clothing and all natural bath and body products for women and men too. And don't forget to ask about their line of custom home products and bed scarves. Look awesome and feel even better. Tail Gunner Apparel on Facebook at Tail Gunner Apparel and at tailgunnerapparel.etsy.com. That's tailgunnerapparel.etsy.com.
Camouflage ain't nothing doesn't go with camouflage. You can't blend in the country. You can't stand out in the fashion world.
Renegade Ramblers Radio Network, 18th Century Ideas for 21st Century Thinkers.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Wasatch Report. I'm Suzanne Sherman. You're tuned into the Renegade Rambler Radio Network. We are live today. We're talking a little bit about liberty, survival, preparedness, why our current state of affairs with regards to our elected representatives, not our leaders, led me to pursue a lifestyle of preparedness and self-reliance. If you want to chime in, 717-467-1736. You can also find me on Facebook, facebook.com/ Cowgirl Esquire. You can listen to us on Facebook. Just go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Renegade Rambler Radio Network. There's a link when you can listen live right there. Want to encourage you also to download our free app on the Android platform. And once you're there, you can listen to, we have live streaming. You can hear my show. You can hear Jeff Johnson's Paradigm Shift. And Jeff Johnson and Daniel Bailey, the founders of our network, also have their show that they do most Sunday evenings called The Renegade and the Rambler. So I want to welcome you back. I was discussing some of the schemes in a few of the cities here in Utah who are shamefully ignoring laws and prohibiting them from collecting money from individuals trying to just earn a living out of their homes that aren't impacting anybody, changing a business license fee to an administrative fee so they can keep the revenue rolling in. I want to share a quick story just that's related to this. A few years ago, a member of the Mountain View Police Department was a member of my family who instructed him, hey, make sure when you are out driving, excuse me, that you come to a full stop. So your wheels on your car, your tires cease all motion. Make sure you always use your turn signals. When you change lanes, turn. Do not go a mile an hour over the speed limit, or you will be pulled over. We have a budget shortfall, and we have been instructed to pull everyone over to make up for that and increase revenue. Ladies and gentlemen, if that is not in direct contravention to our founding principles of freedom, if that is not in direct contravention to every principle of liberty that you can come up with, that if a law-abiding citizen can be pulled over and arrested, because a stop is an arrest, and fined because they're not proving to be a danger to anybody, but the city needs revenue, that's a serious concern, and this is something that we all need to stand up against. I want to turn focus to something that was brought to my attention. I have a good friend out in the Jeremy Ranch area, and that is an area between Salt Lake City and Park City. It's on the outskirts of Park City. And as you're coming over Parlay Summit, there are housing areas out there. This area is growing rapidly and expanding into the woods. And there are trails, hiking trails right behind all these homes. Utah, as we know, has a significant amount of wildlife. And I was talking to my friend last night, and she said her neighbor was actually attacked by a moose. And she sent me an article. I'm actually hoping to interview this woman when she's feeling a little bit better. But it says here, this is from Fox 13 out of Salt Lake City. Here in Summit County, wildlife officials are looking for a female moose and her calf after a woman was trampled on a trail near the Jeremy Ranch area Sunday. I'll tell you, living out here, we have mountain lions, we have wolves, even though the official story is that we do not have wolves. We do. There are some bears running around, bobcats, coyotes, deer, elk, moose. Of all those animals, moose are the ones that intimidate me. They're the ones that are a significant danger. And in the Park City area, they're not pressured at all. They have no fear of human beings. So going back to this article, the Division of Wildlife Resources said that there was a couple walking along a trail, and they came upon this woman near the mother moose and calf Saturday afternoon, but the moose was acting so aggressively, the couple had to back away. Once it was safe to approach, the couple carried this woman to safety. It was not immediately clear to what extent her injuries were. Now, my friend tells me that she has been able to avoid surgery. The rangers are looking for this animal and plan to sedate and relocate them. The female moose are known to be aggressive when they have a calf and can attack people on trails when they are surprised. And this goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning of the show. Everything I have here, I might seem like I'm going all over the place, but this is a web I'm weaving today. And part of this web is telling you that being prepared, having that readiness mindset applies to every aspect of our lives, whether you're hunting like my friend Robin's husband does, or whether you're just a woman on a hike, man or a woman on a hike near your house. This was a neighborhood trail. You need to have that preparedness mindset. So what could she have done differently? Been aware. You know, how many people go out on these trails and have earbuds in? I am never one to do that. I am a huge proponent of situational awareness at all times. But also a cow moose with her calf are particularly dangerous. And we've got the rut season coming up too. I had a friend that worked in the United States Department of Forestry, and he said that a bull moose during the rut is going to present a bigger danger than a grizzly bear. And said in fact, he told me a story about how he was treed by a bull moose one day for an entire day. He was in a very remote area and he was out there on his own. And every time that moose started to walk away and lose interest, it would change its mind and come charging back towards him. I have a hunter friend of mine also here in town for deer season who told me yesterday that statistically in Alaska, cow moose kill more people than grizzly bear. So this is an example of how this preparedness mindset, the survival mindset, is incumbent upon you, even if you're just going for a walk in your neighborhood. Utah neighborhoods are wild. I'm out in the hinterlands here. My neighbor, before we moved, I think it was the fall before we had moved here, was pushing a stroller down our little street. There are 3 houses now in this canyon that's about 4 miles long, and she was walking down the street and a mountain lion jumped a deer about 20 feet in front of her. So again, this is an example of an ordinary daily activity. If you are not prepared to deal with the situation, can turn south very, very fast. So again, always think along these terms. So I want to change gears a little bit. Last week, I had started the show by talking about the benefit of having a community of people that are fellow preppers. You can rely on each other. It reduces some of the stigma. You can kind of split your skill set and have somebody focus. If you have the example I used was a physician in the group, you can have them kind of on standby while you provide other services from them, other skills, carpentry, electricians, plumbing, that sort of thing. I want to share as kind of a side story with this, or a companion story, is several people that you might want to avoid when it comes to having a community of preparedness. Because if there are people that you can't get along with in situations where there's nothing wrong, imagine a situation where the circumstances can be dire. I'll share the article or the link where I found this. I have to dig it up, but I listed them. And the first one that he said to avoid, and I'm going to add a few more myself, is the hothead, the one that loses their mind, their temper, the road rage people. Look for people that have had arrests, assaults, getting a lot of fights. You want to avoid having somebody like that in your community. Once again, somebody like this is not going to be able to maintain a sense of balance and calmness when you have a situation that can be dire. You know, some people might not be okay just in regular life. Imagine when the situation gets worse. There are some people that can't accept any kind of authority whatsoever. Now that can be good or bad, because that kind of sounds like me, but you also have to look for people that can't work together as a team, people that fail in their jobs, people that have gotten in trouble repeatedly. Again, you want to think, who is going to bring a sense of balance to your survival group when the situation gets bad. Also, this should go without saying, liars and thieves. You have to be able to resort to somebody. You have to be able to trust them in these situations. You also have to know that they're not going to steal scarce supplies and goods. You also have to be aware of people that consider themselves to be know-it-alls, that cannot learn new skills, that think everything that they do is correct. I also would consider avoiding, this was interesting. I was reading a book, what was it? Frontier Justice by Arthur Bradley. In addition to having his book on family preparedness, he has a series. Jeff, I believe you've read his entire series. It's a post-apocalyptic series, the first one being Frontier Justice. Do you recall that book?
Yes, I've read all of his, and they're very good. They're well worth reading. They're enjoyable, but they also teach you to think a little bit outside the box and start a little preparing for things.
Well, and again, this ties into what I said earlier. How can you get people engaged in this preparedness mindset, this hobby, this lifestyle, which it could evolve into a lifestyle? I changed my life to accommodate this. Introduce them to some of these books. Some of these are free on Amazon for Kindle. Give somebody a gift for this. Send them the link. Once they start reading, Good Fences was the first one I read by our good friend Boyd Craven. I was hooked. They're quick, easy reads, but the benefit of them is they all include these scenarios that make people think and say, gosh, I never would have thought of that. The best one was called Wake Up Call. If you live in earthquake country, this is a great one, because that was the situation with John McCann, who was on my other show, wrote a great book on that. And these books will introduce you into that subject. So you want to have people that, what he had said, going back to frontier justice, one of the people, and you'll probably remember this, was when they were coming up with some sort of a system of self-governance and normalcy and organization in their society after a man-made induced pandemic, was those that would be precluded from being in charge or being the city officials or a little form of government was anybody that had previous experience in politics. Doesn't that just sound like a grand idea?
Yeah, I love that one, because quite honestly, why do we want to go back? Whether it's at work with me, we do the same thing. We keep putting the same people back in charge. I'm in a union. Put the same people back in charge that messed it up before, and we just keep reelecting them. They mess things up, and then we just put them back in. And that's the same thing with politicians. They mess things up, and we reward them by reelecting them.
Yeah, and that's, and when you talk about the people that were part of the problem before the calamity, whatever you're choosing, if we're talking about a long-term scenario, we need to rebuild society. We have that song at the beginning of this show for a reason. You don't want people that were part of the problem to begin with, and the ethical question of how you deal with them. Do you just leave them out of your group? Do you resort to other measures? Is a topic for another show. But those that were part of this problem, like the ones I was just, we played that clip earlier and from the council, or the people that I was talking about and debating with regards to all these government programs and the forced climate change solutions in Summit County. Meanwhile, they want to increase our property taxes up to 27% because Park City is growing and they need to adjust. But now we're talking, free mammograms. We're talking about these mobile Wi-Fi libraries, and we have our climate change sustainability office. And I said, how about we cut some expenses? In fact, Lisa Yoder can be the first to go. I don't hear any of this. It's just a microcosm of our general government. So when we say that all these problems are in Washington, that's fine, but we also have to look at attacking these issues at a local level. I want to change gears. We're just going to blow through the second break, Jeff. As we all know, season 8 of The Walking Dead premiered last night. I wanted to tie in a little bit of that with an article. It's from a couple years ago, but this is from survivalbase.com website, and it is 7 survival tips learned from The Walking Dead. Mike Church and I used to do a Walking Dead recap when last year for last season, and even Brian McClanahan did a podcast using The Walking Dead as a basis of comparison for different systems of government. I think he used the Aristotelian and Hobbesian systems of government. So there is a place to have meaningful discussion on a show about zombies. It took me a while to get into this show. I didn't start watching it probably till the 5th season, catching up on Netflix. But let's talk about these a little bit, Jeff. The Walking Dead, as we know, is one of the most popular post-APOC shows. It was a #1 show, I think, for a while. And While the stories, I'm reading from this article now, focuses on the characters, there are some lessons to be learned. I think I've talked about a show called The Colony that used to be on the Discovery Channel. It was one of those TV pseudo-reality shows, but it did present some very interesting scenarios in an urban survival situation. These people were left in a large abandoned warehouse. And I think this show went on for about 3 months, and they had to practice numerous skills from getting along, first of all, to using resources that were available. They had to develop foraging skills. They had to come up with ways to have power and water, hot showers. And it was a pretty interesting show. If you can find it maybe on Netflix, it might be worth watching. But the first piece of advice they have here is beware of other survivors, no matter how nice they seem. Now, again, this is something that you can apply towards modern day, just getting around. Always beware of strangers. Always beware of those that try and come up and approach you, putting their hand out, asking for money. They might seem very nice. But going back to the long-term survival situation here, if there's one thing the show has taught us, is that you need to be just as scared of your fellow survivors as you are of the enemy. It's going to be a difficult time. Who are you going to trust? Someone might seem nice. They could be easily playing you for a chump so they can steal your supplies, or just so they can do your harm. The individual they point out here, and this is an example of if something seems too good to be true, it usually is. And I'm sure you'll recognize this character was the governor. And this was actually the gentleman that Brian McClanahan was using in the Hobbesian form of government. He seemed like a really nice guy, and we saw how that turned out. The same goes for countless others in the show that were going to take advantage of them. Do you remember when they first arrived at Terminus, Jeff, and that woman was grilling all that fresh, beautiful meat on the grill? And I'm sitting there watching this because you and I, people like us see things probably different from than a lot of people do. But I thought to myself, I bet that ain't chicken.
Yeah, that was my first thought. I said, man, they didn't butcher a cow. I was like, something's not right here.
Yeah, and once again, here's a parallel with government. You walk into this situation and, oh, welcome, come on in. We will take care of you. We will house you. We will clothe you. We will feed you. We will keep you safe. Well, it turned out these people were a bunch of cannibals. Now, am I accusing of our government of being cannibals? No, I'm not. But, we always use that tax chattel. We are cattle for the government. I'm bovine 30-06. What's your bovine tag number?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I ever had one.
We have to fix that. So
we'll have to fix that. I mean, that was. I love that whole thing, and I still see it around every once in a while. It still pops up. People still reference that.
Those. Yeah, our good friend Andrew in Pennsylvania, I believe he's bovine 1776. Number 2, a secure location is great, but never perfect. And I have to apply that even to where I live. I was discussing this, I think, last week with regards to my location here. As defensible as it is, as remote as it is, as full of supplies or food supplies, game and water, my danger here could be a wildfire. So you're not going to find a perfect situation. The best known example, going back to the show, was the jail, that big prison they lived in seasons 3 and 4. And we know that was eventually compromised. So the lesson here they're saying is keep your eyes open, and no matter how safe you feel, always have a plan to get out quickly and meet up after you bug out. As we saw in season 4, the survivors were pushed from the prison. They didn't have a plan to meet up after an emergency, and that can leave you and your fellow survivors scattered to the wind and in constant danger. Well, that ties back to our other message about always having a plan. We talked last week again with the fires about the need to have a plan if you have to evacuate quickly. That can be a situation in almost any living situation that can come up. So always have a plan. Plan for communications. Again, I know I want to get my ham radio license. I want to have every family member with a portable one with them. So you can. We're pretty much spread out here in Utah. And Utah distance is measured in hours. Everything is either an hour away. Something that's really close is less than an hour. So have a plan for that. Someone always, this is lesson number 3, someone always has a bigger gun. And here we see a picture of a tank. Doesn't matter how big your gun is or how many you have, there will always be someone with something out there that is bigger. And don't rely on the size of your guns or the amount of ammo you have to protect yourself. Learn how to survive and make sure you have other methods of defending the camp that aren't guns. You know, and that's the thing too, you could get in a firefight and if there's just a couple of you that flash from your gun will give away your position. You know, people that, this is one of the things also on Doomsday Preppers, if you watch that show, Jeff, a lot of these people had such a huge stockpile of firearms that they put all of their security in the fact that they were heavily armed. And as we know, that's not always going to be the solution. And that's also a topic for another show. Basic survival skills, the 4th lesson, basic survival skills will save your life. And again, this is something that you can tie into every aspect of what you're doing. If you're out there hunting, when we were out bull elk hunting a couple weeks ago, it really surprised me is how remote the terrain was and also how treacherous it is. You're going up and down very steep hills, lots of rocks, lots of debris and branches, logs on the ground. You take one false step out there and you could be stuck there for a while. Do you have what it takes to keep yourself safe and warm until you can get help? I think I told the story of a couple hunters. It was very windy that day and a tree blew down and they were stranded. They could not get their side by side and they were about 8 miles from camp until other people went out to get them. Fortunately, they could have survived the night. They had enough warm equipment with them. But the gentleman hunter was 76 years old. That would not have been an optimal solution. Lesson number 5. Boy, isn't this the truth? Zombies are everywhere. Now, I'm thinking zombies. Do you remember, Jeff, a while back they had that game? I think it was Pokemon Go.
It was something like that. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah,
it
was.
But then you go out and find it was on your it was an app on your phone, and you went searching for these things.
Yeah, and I mean, I could not believe it. I'm watching just people walking everywhere with their faces down in their dumb phones, not aware of anything going on around them. Anybody could have jumped them at any time. I even had a friend come up and tell me that somebody wandered into their garage, their open garage, because it said there was one of those little Pokemon guys that they could get if they went in there. That's a zombie to me. But this article says, while the chances of real zombies are being everywhere are pretty low, in a survival situation, you're going to have to deal with different sort of Walking Dead. While you might be prepared for most of what the world might throw at you, most people won't have the slightest bit of preparation ready. And Jeff, that's something we say time and time again. There's really nothing more dangerous, like we have the cow, that cow moose protecting her baby. Your friendly neighbors who can't feed their kids might not be so friendly after all. They might not take no for an answer. They might not be happy with the food that you give them. They might want more. These people that are not prepared, I consider them zombies now. I consider them the Walking Dead now. But the article said these people are considered zombies. They will be wandering around ready to pounce on anyone who's prepared to take what they want. And when I say who is prepared, meaning have prepared for the situation. While you probably won't find one that wants to munch on your brains, most of these real life zombies will want to take everything you have. And there are some people that also, and I talked about this before, they're just going to be opportunists. They will choose not to prepare. We will have people that say, I'm not going to prepare because I'll just take what I need once the time comes. So this is another reason why security is so important. So the other lesson here is Learn weapons other than guns. What are you going to do if your gun malfunctions, if your gun breaks and you can't replace it with a part once you run out of ammo? We know guns are useful tools, but you'd rather not think about having to use one against another person, especially when a major disaster may have wiped out many people already, but it is sometimes necessary. If things have gotten so bad that there isn't any real law enforcement, your gun might be the only thing standing between survival and death. I agree with that completely. But that doesn't mean it's going to be useful forever. As I said, you can have parts malfunction. This is why I'm also an advocate of also having a supply of spare parts. What's likely to malfunction on your gun? Keep those parts handy. Also, have firearm cleaning equipment as part of your preps as well. Ammo manufacturers are not likely going to be making more rounds. Reloading is a very useful skill if you do that and you're set up for that. Learn how to use and fight with weapons, and also hunt with tools that are not guns. This can be knives, bows, a samurai sword. Remember Michonne? If that's your thing, don't just carry them. Learn how to use them. Jeff, when you were watching the show last night, did it just amaze you at how quickly they were, how easily they were wasting all that ammo just shooting off, just to shoot?
Yeah, it was obviously that these are not gun people or have had no training whatsoever. But at the same time, Rick is supposedly law enforcement, and he would have been trained on firearms. Yet he just was spraying and praying, just shooting rounds everywhere at no one. Which, yeah. I mean, like, he had an unlimited supply that they were going to have bullets for the next 1,000 years. So, yeah, it was just very strange in different places last night.
Yeah,
I had a hard time following some of that show last night.
Yeah, with all the money they put into making the zombies realistic, you would think they would have a little bit better handle on their firearms. And this is nothing that's just applies to The Walking Dead. We see this all the time on television shows. Horrible firearms handling, muzzle control, the finger on the trigger. And I think last season, I don't know if you recall this, but Sasha was going to be a sniper, and she's hanging out the window with, I think, the Negan in the crosshairs. They're showing the view from that. But then if you look at the scene showing her, the optics have the cover on them on the scope. And you have to wonder, is everybody there so uninformed when it comes to firearms that nobody noticed? And she didn't even notice that she's looking through a black scope cover. I mean, I just was aghast at that. So, but yeah, that was the thing. The other thing I noticed was, wow, these cars are all just starting. How many years has it been now? And they still have fuel that hasn't gone bad. These vehicles are still starting. So again, the show's entertaining. It's interesting, but there are some fun lessons to learn if you're just going to watch the show and have a good time. It can get people, you can start that dialogue on prepping by talking about a show. Again, if you have a common interest in something like that, look at these books, these apocalyptic books, and some great messages involved on there. So I like to tie in the idea that we have to turn away from the mainstream media for our sources of information, because if you focus on that, you're going to think that everything's just fine and the government will always protect you. My eyes were opened when we had 9/11, and I honestly thought that our president, George W. Bush, would be the one to keep us safe. When I started looking outside the trifecta of sources to keep us stupid, meaning the government and the politicians, the media and the education system, I learned that we are being lied to, we are being manipulated, and I decided to prepare. I started off with common sense. I eventually turned my life around. I live in the mountains. I have a great life. My kids are loving it. You can do this in a manner that doesn't make you an outcast. You can do this and enhance your life. I want to thank you for listening today. This is the Wasatch Report. I'm Suzanne Sherman, and the Renegade Rambler Radio Network will be available to you anytime, 24/7. Just go and hit our app and go to our Facebook page and enjoy the shows.